But before we do that, I'm going to introduce you to Teana Boston Mammah. Hi. She has worked as a sociology teacher in tertiary.
That's the one.
I was saying it right?
Tertiary.
Yeah. Education in London for 10 years after gaining her bachelor degree in sociology from Essex University.
With John Bercow.
Hmm?
I studied with John Bercow, who's now famous.
Who's very famous now. Does it matter? I think you're very famous too. She then moved to the Netherlands. She doesn't say it in her bio, but it was for love. Very handsome husband. To study women's studies at Utrecht University. After this, she worked in Rotterdam for diverse non-governmental foundations and various organizations in connection to emancipation, diversity, and also participative drama. So many things. Boston Mammah completed her MA in Urban Studies and Policy at Erasmus University in 2012. She has been working as a researcher and teacher at the Willem Koning Academy. I don't know if everybody knows what that is. So
I'll explain.
Yeah, you're going to explain. Her areas of interest are found in the intersection of discourses on gender, race, and class, which she teaches in the social practice, cultural diversity. Boston Mammah has published articles on inclusion and exclusion mechanisms within education and gender gap in urban sociology. As you can see, Boston Mammah, my dear Teana, is a connection. Not only in between different academic fields, but also in between teachers and students, or even more so in between the unheard and the heard. I'm proud to say that she's my friend. She can listen to you, but she can make you listen to yourself. She made me listen to myself, to the unheard voices within yourself. But most of all, she makes you hear yourself by giving you a voice. I'm very proud to announce Teana Boston Mammah.
Well, hello everybody. I feel a bit overwhelmed, of course, by that introduction. I'll just start a little bit with me, and I know that sounds really egotistical, and it's not in the Instagram way with me, shine, shine, shine with me. It's because I'm a sociologist, and more specifically, somebody who follows something that's called symbolic interactionism within sociology, that understands that reality is not out there, but within. So that when I tell stories, the stories that I tell, or the tales I'm going to tell you in a minute, they are from my perspective. So that needs to be remembered. What is my perspective? Very shortly, my perspective is the perspective of someone that grew up till they were 10 in Freetown, Sierra Leone, West Africa, knew that as the only world. You have to imagine, this is the only world I knew. This world was populated by lots and lots and lots of black people doing all kinds of things in every space I was in. And in fact, I was white. So, on my 10th, my mum decides, and my dad, that we have to go to England. Oh, and let's move to Bournemouth, where, exactly. So those of you that are English, that know anything about England, know do not take a black girl who's 10 to Bournemouth, where among 200,000 people, there may be at most 10 black people. So that is why I say to people I'm a sociologist. Simply having that experience, and I'm sure that those of you working in mental health will understand what an immense impact that has on a 10-year-old. when you go from having an identity that's white to being black, literally within 2 weeks. And as Aminata said, it's not bad to be black, it's not great to be white. It's not that that's the issue. It's the issue of what's associated with these positions. So, having said that, all these things led me to become a teacher, of course, because, of course, I experience many unpleasant situations. I always say to my students, I have a love-hate relationship with the education system. Let me make that clear. I love it, but I also hate it because I see the damage it does. But I love it because, as Aminata says, what it can do, what we can do in education if we have the courage to educate in the ways that we think people should be educated. And not only that, if we have the courage to engage. Engagement as a teacher is extremely important. And do you see your students as individuals, or are they numbers? Are they a curriculum that needs to be got through? Or are they people whose position you, as a teacher, desperately need to understand and help move in whatever way? And that movement can be sitting still. It can also be reflecting. It doesn't mean we have to go forward. It can mean we can sit still and take time with each other and think. What is it we want from each other in a particular setting? So, I am always fascinated by people in spaces. Bodies in spaces is how I interact with the world. Which bodies, which spaces, which codes? Coming to the film. I will get there, I promise you, eventually. I was supposed to be showing you a lovely film. This film was made by students at the Willem de Koning Academy. The Willem de Koning Academy is a higher educational art and design school in Rotterdam. I don't need to tell you the problems higher education has with access and inequality and inclusion and diversity. There are a lot of people that write about this better than I can do. Lots of articles. I can even send you a mail with a whole long list. One of the issues in Rotterdam, I'm going to speak locally, one of the issues in Rotterdam is that the school population is 60% second and third generation. 60% second, third generation. The population of students at the Willem de Koning Academy that come from second and third generation is actually between 7 and 15. So we are doing something very wrong. We're not diverse, and we're definitely not inclusive. But how many people know that in that space? That becomes a question. Who knows this? Who even notices this? Who thinks about this when they walk into that space, looking at the bodies in that space? Another beautiful thing that Aminata said that I have to bring in now is, who are the women that went before you? Who enabled me, as only when I first started teaching there, only the third black tutor out of 300 tutors? Who brought me into that space to experience what Sarah Ahmed calls being a space invader? Another black woman brought me into that space. Nobody else brought me into that space. A black woman, and her name is Dr. Nana Adusei Poku, who now is not anymore in that space, but is now in a space in New York teaching in an art university there, brought me into that space because she was alone in that space and she needed to transform that space and to think about, how do we transform this space? How do we transform it for the students? How do we transform the curriculum? What can we do in this space? So, she brought me in to help her. It was her vision, and she set up this project called Vedika Makes a Difference. This project can be looked at online. There's a website called vedikamakes-a-difference.com. That's going to be my only PR moment. What we tried to do, she set up an action research program for 2 years, trying to think about ways. We started talking about inclusion and diversity, and she ended up talking about decolonialism and white privilege. You can see the journey, people. In the space of 4 years, you start to realise that we cannot use soft terms for a situation that's very, very difficult. I don't know if any of you understand the art world and the art and design world, but people say to me, because I'm a sociologist, so I come into a context where people are telling me it's very normal for there to be only white bodies in spaces that have got the label art and design on them. It's very normal, Teana. Why are you making this into a problem, Teana? You know, it's not in their culture, Teana. They simply just don't have the cultural background to be able to do this. Oh, and also their parents don't want them to do this. Their parents aren't interested in art and design, Teana. So it's not that it's our problem. So I'm just trying to sketch something of the atmosphere of the institution in which I work. Clearly, not everybody thinks this way in that institution, otherwise I would not be there. But let's just say this is just trying to give you a feel for what some of the students have had to go through. So, as part of this project called Vedika Makes a Difference, we tried to set up and activate students because we've talked about the student voice taking up space. Like, how do students take up space when in the bodies that they're in, they're not even allowed to be there? They shouldn't actually be there, or they're exceptional. Imagine being in an educational environment where either you're not allowed to be there or you've got to be exceptional. I mean, oh my God, the pressure. So one of the projects, for the final presentation, when we finished the project, we tried to encourage a group of students to put their experiences on the table for tutors. These students designed a workshop. From this workshop, they tried to make the participants feel, have some sensory, tactile, embodied experience of what it feels like to be excluded, or what it feels like when only one part of you is spoken to. Like you in your earlier work, I've forgotten your name, so I was hoping it was going to be up there, showed with your play, when only one bit of you is spoken to. And I have to say, when we're talking about that one bit that's spoken to, we call it a bit from the outside, but from the inside, that bit is very fragile, it's very precarious. That bit doesn't necessarily understand that it's a bit. It has to come to terms with the fact that it's seen that way, and that it's made into this exceptional student, or this student that shouldn't be there. So on the other side, there's a lot going on. So, having got the students to make this play, the students then called themselves, "We are a movement, not a collective." So they gave themselves a name around which they could speak. This movement was made up of Sarana, Selena, Jasper, Jeroen, Fons, I'm forgetting a few people, but I'm sure they'll... And Jeroen, who's also a gay man, he said, but white. So's Jasper. And Jeroen said, you know, he came from a village where it was very difficult for him to be a gay man, a predominantly white village. And he said he was so happy when he came to the Koning in the first year because it gave him space, he could develop his gay identity. But he said he did notice that you only succeeded in the class if you went with the ideas. So going with going with the flow. He said if you wanted to say something that was not part of the narrative, then you did not do so well. So he said that meant for him that he did not have to think about his whiteness for the first 2 years, which is when Teana says, the first quote, one of the first early quotes I told you, wow, imagine not having to think about that. So he said he got the first 2 years free until he ended up in one of my classes. And I start talking about, so who are we in the bodies that we're in? From what positions? Who are we talking from? And this is Selena. And Selena's quote is, so, how is it of use to me if I have people in the group that are woke, but keep that hidden, that understand injustice and oppression, but never speak up in the moments that needs to be spoken up? Like, how is that good? How does that help me? And so what she was calling to is she was calling to the group. So one of the things I'm trying to give you some insight is when you have a group like this who actually voluntarily get together and they are on different axes of positioning, marginalizations that are seen as not part of the dominant group, that also has problems within, because one of the things that people aren't used to doing is they're not used to talking about these positions. And, oh, never mind, I don't need you anymore, goodbye.
I think this is a good ending. I think this is a good ending.
I like it.
Thank you all. Thank you.